Hello, welcome to RSC Fire Modeling. In today's video, we're going to talk about various documents on the website for your use. The first thing is go to rscfiremodeling.com. Along the menu bar at the top, we have a section called Downloads. Open that up. The first set of documents we have in there are just a variety of research papers as they relate to reduced scale enclosures. A lot of good information in there, and I definitely encourage you to read those and help you improve your knowledge on reduced scale enclosure modeling. The next set of documents are a variety of conversion tables and graphs that help you in calculating the heat release rate for the reduced scale enclosure. We have a video out there that we talked about how to use the mathematical formula, and sometimes people are intimidated by that. So we went ahead and created these tables and graphs to help you, and that way if you don't want to use the math formula, you can use these tables and charts. So we're going to go ahead and open up the conversion table, and we're going to talk about that. Okay, now that we've got the PDF open, it's a two-page document, and that's because it has the length scales across the top, a half, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. And the second page continues with an 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. Now you can carry this out to whatever dimensions you want, or whatever scales you want. The next row has the decimal equivalent for the various scales which are used in the mathematical calculations. And the third row is the percentage of the heat release rate. And if you recall in the mathematical calculation video, we talked about a quarter scale, the heat release rate being approximately 3% of that of the full scale enclosure. And going down the left side, we have the heat release rate in kilowatts for the full scale enclosure. And then going in the other columns, these are all the heat release rates based upon the various scales that would be required in the reduced scale enclosure. So for example, in our full scale enclosure, we typically use a 100 kilowatt fire. And as a quarter scale, when we build that, we would be required to have a 3 kilowatt fire in the reduced scale enclosure. Again, you can work this out mathematically, or you can just go ahead and use these charts depending on whatever you want. Okay, next we're going to open up the graphs so we can see how to use those. Okay, we're back here at Downloads, and let's go to heat release rate, and we're going to be looking at a 1/4 scale. So we'll go ahead and open that up. Okay, now that we got the graph open, when we look at the graph, it shows the heat release rate in the reduced scale enclosure along the left side on the y-axis, and the x-axis is the full scale enclosure heat release rate. Each graph has the various length scales, and this graph covers the heat release rates of the full scale enclosure from 25 to 500 kilowatts. Scrolling down, the next page has 525 kilowatts to 1,000. So if you recall in our earlier discussion, when we have a 100 kilowatt fire in the full scale enclosure, and we're using a quarter scale, we'll go 100 kilowatts where it meets on the green line, come across, and this halfway point here is 3 kilowatts. This intersection is a little bit above it. So if you recall from our previous chart, a 100 kilowatt fire in a full scale enclosure requires a 3.1 kilowatt fire in the reduced scale enclosure. So this just gives you a little added information that you can use. But let's say you're going to model smoke movement in an atrium. And so you're going to have a heat release rate of, let's say, 875 kilowatts in the full scale enclosure. And you choose to use a 1/6 scale. So that would be our blue line. 875 kilowatts intersects the blue line at 10 kilowatts. So if you were using a 1/6 scale in a full scale enclosure and you had an 875 kilowatt heat release rate in the full-scale enclosure. Your reduced scale enclosure would require you to have a 10 kilowatt fire. So that's how you use the charts. Hope this helps. Be safe and happy modeling.